Is money the root of all evil? More importantly, does it make you a bad person if you've acquired a lot of money? Let's explore. I almost call this talk Money and the Moral Dilemma, because a lot of people see people who have accumulated wealth as morally incorrect, morally unjust. They now have no character and they're basically bad people who are out to get you and do everything for themselves. Very selfish people. I'd say that today, it might be easy to think that, especially if you're in a position where you're working so hard and you just feel like you're not making enough money. You are struggling, and no matter how much you earn, you just can't seem to save any up. Worse yet, are you looking at people that maybe have acquired money and think like, oh, they're just in a position of power and look how easily it came to them and they're a jerk because they're my boss. Today we can very easily say, oh, money is the root of all evil and look at all these bad people around us. The saying is actually out of the Bible, and how it is worded is that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And how I interpret that is money itself isn't bad. Money itself isn't evil. What we might be willing to do to get it, however, could be construed as bad or evil. My definition of money is more simple than that, and I just look at money like a tool, a means of exchange in which we've all agreed upon that this is what the value of the money or dollar or euro dollar or British pound is, and you want $2 for a cup of coffee, and I'm willing to pay $2 because I feel like it's worth that. So it's just a means of exchange, a way of getting business done. It means that when I go to the lumber yard to buy enough lumber to build a shed, that I don't have to cart a van full of goats to trade for this wood, right? I can bring money because we all recognize it as the means of exchange. We've all given it a value, just like gold or silver. Why this even came up is that recently I saw a speaker giving a talk, and they were just blasting away and really ripping apart the wealthy, and they blanket labeled the rich as, just money mongers who are greedy and constantly trying to, beat up on their employees and take advantage of society and basically stealing their wealth. In other words, they were very bad people. And they went on to say that they weren't always bad people, but the money itself, the, acquiring of wealth made them bad people and made them evil people. Hence, money is the root of all evil. They added to that this is why the younger generation, and I should mention that the person giving the talk was extremely young, and they said, this is why the younger generation just doesn't want to work. We don't want to work for these bad, evil people who are just trying to take advantage and abuse us. Now, of course, there are certain words that if you think negatively about money, that you may be forced to associate certain words with money. You may associate the word greed. You may associate the word obsession. You may associate the word control or controlling. In other words, all of these negative aspects of having money, and money makes you like that. Money is just a magnifying glass. I can't tell you how wrong I feel that this speaker was, and I disagreed intensely because money doesn't make you bad. Money just magnifies the person that you already are inside. And now you're just that person, but you have a little less fear going out into the world of acting how you want to act. An example would be you have a job, you work, and maybe you don't like your boss. Maybe you even like your job, but you're not crazy about your boss. You feel that they are controlling and they're manipulative and they're not the best boss. They could be a better boss. But you would never say this, right? You would never even say it it to a fellow employee maybe for fear that it might get back to the boss, and then you're going to be called up to the office and you could lose your job. You could be fired. You may have employees you work with and you don't even like them, and you feel like maybe they're just kissing the boss's butt, or maybe you go by their office and they're doing nothing. They're never really doing anything. And you're like, how does this person even keep their job? But maybe you don't say anything or bring it up for fear that you'll get dragged into HR and then scrutinized. So we have a certain fear, and you don't say these things, but you want to. Like, you really want to. You want to like reap the hammer down because you know what's going on, and you really want to give that employee or that boss of yours a piece of your mind, but you hold back. Well, maybe comes the day that you're the boss. What happens when you leave and maybe you go start your side business because you know a little bit about marketing or printing or serving coffee or whatever business you've started, but you're the boss. How you act is just a representation of how you have always been. So if you are a great boss, then it's because you have always approached your job and your work in a certain way. Right? You didn't hold back. You spoke your mind and you said things. I've had a lot of jobs that I didn't really like, and it wasn't the greatest job, but I realized that the job wasn't me. The job wasn't my life. It was just a portion of the soundtrack of my life. Something going on in the background for me to get to A to B. As a boss, I carry that in there. I carry that to what I do as a boss. I treat people fairly. I treat people with respect, and hopefully they see that and they appreciate that. Money doesn't change you. Money exposes you. It just shows the side of you that's always been there, the true you, who you really are. And if you were, kind of a son of a bee, as an employee, you may be a son of a bee as a boss, right? If you were a really nice and kind person, that doesn't mean that if you become a boss, you let people push you around and shove you and do things and walk all over you. You're still the boss, and hopefully you're a good boss and you maintain to control your environment, but you still want to be good to your employees because you remember what it feels like to be in the trenches. You remember what it feels like to be an employee and trying to work and pay your bills. Remember, it's not something that changes you. The dollars don't do that, but they can expose you for who you truly are. There's another side of this whole thing of when people sort of think negatively about money and they carry this with them that, well, money is the root of all evil and money makes you bad, because we all have to work for money, right? And we probably have jobs. I'm not going to get metaphysical and all spiritual on you, but I am going to tell you that we are energy. Right? Like, we really are. I mean, to the point where if you have a heart attack and fall on the ground, they put these paddles on you and inject electricity to try and jumpstart you again. We are made up of energy, meaning we are operating on a frequency. That frequency is a very real thing, and it's known as the human frequency. You know it and you recognize it, even if you don't know that you know it and you recognize it. When someone is operating at a very high frequency, we can just tell when they walk into the room, right? We're happy to talk to them. We want to interact with them. There's a certain energy, and that means that they're actually vibrating at a very high frequency, and that's attracting like frequencies, believe it or not. When you are operating at a very low frequency, let's say out of anger or depression, right? Then you're vibrating very little. It's sort of like people at the end of their life. Literally, their vibration is just going down to zero. And they're operating at an extremely low frequency when you're in this anger or depressed or suicidal state or pissed off all the time or whatever. Money works no different. It is actually attracted to a higher frequency. It's not attracted to a low frequency. So if you have this frequency where you're always downtrodden and upset and it just surrounds the struggle, and that's all you're thinking is these negative thoughts about money and people who have money and make money and have too much money, then that's the frequency you're operating. So it's very hard to attract it and make more money, if you will. I know that just being in my position if I have an employee, whether they love their job or not, but they come to work and they're happy and they're always happy-go-lucky and they're willing to go that extra step, and maybe someone else called out on Saturday and they're willing to work on a Saturday, and they always go that extra mile. When an opportunity comes up for either me to give them more money or an opportunity comes up for them to have a better position, I'm going to offer it to that person. That's the one, not the employee who's coming in and never wants to work, always shows up late, or always is complaining, and I don't hear it, but I hear it through the other employees that they're maybe bitching about their job and how they want to find something better and how they don't like what they're doing and how every job they have makes them depressed or angry or they hate all their bosses. Why would I offer that opportunity to that person? See, money likes money. It is attracted to itself. So when you're operating at a higher frequency, then especially if you're thinking about money and the power of wealth, then you actually bring it into your life. You will attract opportunities, and that's where the money actually comes from. This is not only true of money, this is true of relationships, this is true of enjoyment, this is true of everything. One time I met a woman, I'll go off on a tangent here. When I was very young, I was about 17 years old, and I went to a friend of mine's house, and I walked in, and his mother was sitting at the kitchen table with one of her best friends, and the friend was crying. She was just crying her eyes out. And of course, being the inquisitive 17-year-old, I had to get involved. And I said, what's going on? What's the matter? And the woman says, well, my husband, filed for divorce, and we're getting a divorce, and this is actually my third marriage. I said, holy moly. I said, what happened? And she said, well, he's just a drinker. He's an alcoholic and he drinks too much and we end up fighting a lot and it's just not good. And I'm just tired of this happening. And I said, well, what do you mean tired of this happening? And she says, well, my first husband was a drunk and he was an alcoholic, and my second husband was drunk and he was abusive, and now I'm stuck with the same thing over here and I'm just getting divorced a third time. And she's probably in her mid-30s. And I said, when you're 17 you think you can help the world and you know everything. And I said, well, where'd you meet your first husband? And she said, well, right down the street at that bar on the corner, Sammy's. And I said, oh yeah, I would drive by it all the time on my way to school. And I said, where'd you meet your second husband? And she said, I met him at that same bar. I go there after work sometimes and I have a few drinks and I met him over there. And I said, well, I already know the answer at this point, but where'd you meet your third husband? And she said, I met him at the same bar. And I think at this point she got what I was saying. But see, her frequency in life, just in general, is low. She herself wasn't, an alcoholic. She's just someone who enjoyed a drink, but that was her comfort zone. That was the world that she went to, and being accepted in that world and feeling good, that's where her self-esteem allowed her to be. See, she wasn't going to an art gallery for a wine tasting and having a drink over there where she may meet someone operating at a slightly higher frequency. She was going to her comfort zone. So a lot of times how you feel about money directly relates how we feel about ourselves because of our frequency. So elevating your thinking is the first thing that you can do towards attracting the things you want in life, whether it's money, whether it's success, whether it's a great partner. If you are operating at a low frequency, you are literally sending out a bad signal. Money is like anything else. When you understand it, you are attracted to it and you're okay with jumping in, right? When you don't understand it, you become a spectator. You stand on the outside for fear of entering the game. So opportunities will find you simply by changing your thinking and elevating your frequency. Ayn Rand said that the man who damns money has obtained it dishonestly, and the man who respects money has truly earned it. So let's go out and earn, but let's do it with the understanding that money is not bad. Money is just a means of exchange, and operate at a higher frequency. And believe me, you will attract not only opportunities, but opportunities that translate into the wealth of your future. My name is Daniel F. Margasa. You are watching the Almost Criminal Millionaire channel. And if you enjoy learning about the topics of money and finance and want to know how to increase the health and wealth of your bank account, then please like and subscribe for more.